Hello everyone, my name is and I'm from the media in PR committee here at IMT Dubai. And I welcome you all to our new series, A Dialogue With. Today we have Dr. Joe Martin Hayes with us, who is the Program Chairperson of Student Life here at IMT Dubai. Welcome, Dr. Joe.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
So we actually sat down to check your profile so that we could prepare for this interview. We saw your CV, it was of 16 pages and full of accomplishments.
I tried to keep it short.
Yeah, so 16 pages, full of accomplishments, be it your research work, your honors, scholarship, work experience, that's quite a lot. You have done work that people actually aspire to. People like me actually feel jealous that someday we might not be able to achieve how much you have done. So we thought let's start from the starting that you have done at US Army. So we got to know that you started your working with US Army. So tell us something about that.
Well, I think when I got out of high school, I worked 3 jobs, and I was making, I suppose, decent money working 3 different jobs and spending the rest of my time partying and having basically no life. So I started to think to myself, what could I actually do to get away from that environment and find something more, more satisfying or more productive for my future career. And I chose the military, and I'm really glad I did. It gave me a sense of purpose, it gave me a sense of pride and a sense of accomplishment. It challenged me a lot and changed me in many ways, and I think some of the ways it changed me are still with me some 40 years later.
So military life gives you a lot of challenges on a day-to-day life. You are in the battlefield, you are working. So what do you think, apart from after the military career, you had an excellent career in other fields as well, particularly in education. So how do you think the military career, the military experience has helped you achieve your daily goals or the life goals that you have had?
Well, in a couple ways, for sure. One is by giving me a sense of confidence that I can do just about anything I set my mind to do. I didn't have that before the military. And probably most importantly, 2 more things. One is, so the confidence, and then the discipline that it taught me, and in many ways I still have, is probably the single most important thing that has contributed to my success over the years and the different jobs I've had. And thirdly, it wasn't until the military that I discovered my physical self. And so I've been pretty much into sports and athletics ever since. But prior to the Army, not so much.
Yeah, we can see that definitely. Great physique. So we got to know that apart from the teaching, you also are associated with SOVO Kenya. So SOVO, for those who don't know, is the Association for Safeguarding Orphans and Widows. So tell us something about that, your association with them, and how are you contributing?
Well, I'm not even sure how it happened. I became friends with Mr. Ken Aim, who's the CEO of SOVO. He, having been in the Emirates for probably some marketing work that they were doing, and we connected and began talking about possibilities. And over a year or 2, Ken was able to come back here to Dubai 3 or 4 times and spend several weeks each time with me. And during that time, we developed a plan for a series of projects that we would like to do in Kenya that would allow our students to get some project experience, would allow me to expand my work in sustainable development, and quite possibly could make a huge contribution to the well-being of citizens in Kenya. And that's probably, you want to know more about those projects? Or?
So how can the students P.R.I.S.M Dubai are contributing to that, your research?
Well, what we're doing right now is I've got 5 or 6 guys who have committed to working toward this project, and what we're designing is what's called a ecological or ecosystem solution. The initial project is a pilot, and we're trying to find a location in rural Kenya where we'll be able to implement this project. And the project consists of a range of things that in total will allow a village or a rural community to become self-sufficient. And it's got power and hygiene and medicine and education and commerce and a range of associated things that we hope over time the local inhabitants of the area will be able to take charge and control of the various aspects of the projects and the technology and the business process in that, so they will need neither us nor anyone else in the long run to help them sustain that.
Sustainable.
Yeah, so it's truly a sustainable development project.
So we also got to know that you have done research, quite some research in RJRA. You taught us about this in one of your class, that you have done some research on RJRA, which is reasoning, judgment, and reflective action. So can you throw some light about that? What is that?
This started with some work a friend of mine and I were doing back in Australia before I shifted to Malaysia. So it's been a couple years now. And reasoning, judgment, and reflective action were the first parts of some work that we were doing around the area of higher thinking order capabilities in professionals. And over the 3 or 4 years that we've been working toward that goal, it's expanded to include problem solving and decision making within an ethical and sustainable framework. So again, it's kind of an ecological or ecosystem way of thinking about professional capabilities and what it takes to enable and equip people to continue to learn and develop over their life cycle.
So you mentioned you were in Australia, then you shifted to Malaysia. So you have lived in various places. We got to know that you were born in the US and moved quite some places there as well. Mm-hmm. And after that you lived in Germany, New Zealand, Malaysia, Australia, I'm losing the count, and now UAE. So that's quite a lot of cultures that you have seen. There's a lot of cultural difference that you've seen from the West, East, you have moved places. So how does culture shape the working environment of any place?
Well, that's a really hard question. First of all, any particular organization, as many listeners would know, has its own culture. I call that like almost a corporate personality or an identity. And people who work in these organizations over time acquire the attributes of citizens in a particular community or organization. So they tend to take on the habits and even the dress attire and even the ways of thinking, and that becomes kind of like a corporate mindset. So one of the things that means for me as a sociologist and a researcher is to understand organization as an identity or a personality. So if you think about that, then every organization is going to have its unique personality or culture. And within a larger society, region, or nation, there's also an identity, a cultural identity that's kind of pervasive. So you've got a little bit of uniqueness within the individual, and then within the organization, and then within the nation. So you've got basically a group of people who kind of understand each other.
Yeah.
Similar language, similar values, and those kinds of things. All of a sudden, you have an organization working in another region. They've set up business there, or they're working with clients in another country, and that's when cultural differences really start to make themselves felt and pose problems, but also pose marvelous opportunities for increasing understanding and increasing business and that kind of thing. Looking back over the years, and as you highlighted, I've lived and worked in different countries, and I'd be the first to admit that I'm in no way the global citizen that I'd like to be, or could be, or that people assume I am just because I've lived in these different places. I think what happens is the greater experience you gain cross-culturally, the more you realize what you don't know.
Yeah.
And that there's so much more to learn, and so many opportunities to expand your thinking and your way of being. However, those different experiences do equip you to go to new places with a little more awareness and sensitivity and caution, perhaps, than you might otherwise. The first time I went to a foreign country, arrogant American, I knew it all, and then all of a sudden I was surprised. I don't understand what people are saying. They're acting strange. They don't accept me, and all those kinds of things. Over time, you begin to realize that these cross-cultural ways of interacting, again, are opportunities for moving into that space, if you choose to go there.
So you lived for quite some part in West and some quite some part in this area, this particular region as well. So what major differences that you have seen from the West and this UAE culture? Any example or anything that you have seen? What major difference?
Well, first of all, Dubai is probably quite different than anywhere else in the world. While there is an indigenous culture, so to speak, with our Emirati brethren, they really make up maybe at most 15% of the population. And the other 80–90% of the population are people like you and I, who come from different places in the world. And we bring with us our what we have to offer in terms of our education and our skills. We also bring our own baggage from India, United States, Russia, wherever people come from, right? But what's interesting is on any given day, you can run into people from dozens of different countries. And so it's not like you can say that Dubai is this way. If you say it's this way, what that means is it's a composite, it's a cosmopolitan complex of people from all over the world, which is exciting and interesting.
Yeah.
And probably makes it easier to do business here than in many other places. Now, there is some bureaucracy and some limitations and with the way things happen, but Dubai in particular has been working hard to make business simpler and establishing a business, for example, much more quicker than ever before. And so there's a lot of good news stories about working here or coming to work here. Now, there are differences. It's essentially a monarchy. It doesn't have the perhaps democratic machinery and thinking that I might be used to from the United States or some other countries I've lived in, for example. But that doesn't seem to really interfere or get in the way with doing business or getting to know people. one thing I guess I would observe is that making personal contacts with, quote, the locals is not all that easy, even for someone who tends to be open-minded or has been around in that sense of working with different cultures and that. There seems to be a little bit of a barrier between the expats and the locals. At work, if you happen to work side by side, you don't really feel that. But after work, you do feel it because there's really no mixing of the cultures in that sense. And I see that as an opportunity for the future that I think both sides are going to be having to work on if Dubai is really going to be show its leadership on the world stage in terms of business and tourism and travel and those kinds of things.
Okay, so being the chairperson of Student Life here at IMT Dubai, so what are your views about the students? Like we have lots of batches, PCB, MBA, BSBA, Executive MBA, so there's a lot of student life here. So being the chairperson, what are your views about the students?
Well, I was excited and remain passionate about my role in student life and the opportunity to work with students closely in that way. It's a privilege and a pleasure, really. And it is interesting because we have those different batches you noted. Even if I weren't involved in student life, I have a chance to teach in all those cohorts because I teach on the weekend with our undergraduate Emirati students and with the executive MBA. During the week I have my MBA students and my undergraduate students, and I also have the dual country program MBA students from India. And each batch is different and each batch is interesting. I don't think one is better than another. In that sense, I love them all. But working with each requires kind of, for me, in terms of teaching at least, some flexibility, put it that way. But again, that's more of a pleasure than it is a challenge. I think the students on the whole are really good people. They're good students. They're strong academically. They like to have fun and have a life beyond study and work, and that's fine. They should. Particularly representing student life, I have to say I think sports and recreation and social and cultural activities are, in my opinion, as important, if not more so, than many of the courses we might take, because we learn through those activities as well, especially through the clubs, committees, and student organizations. There's a lot of leadership and teamwork and managerial kind of things that students acquire in making all the things happen that actually happen here.
So you have been living in the UAE from quite some time now.
This is my third year.
Yeah, third year. So what again, according to you, is the essential thing that students here need to succeed?
As students or as in the future?
Like the students that study here when they graduate and they have jobs. So what really important thing that you should have to succeed in a market like UAE and the Middle East?
Well, I'm not sure I'm the best person to ask, to tell you the truth, because I don't conduct business here really myself. I spend most of my time on campus or affiliated with academic themes. I have been in many of our partners' businesses because of students on internships and projects and that kind of thing. So I see what's happening. but I don't personally have that work experience as I might have in some other countries. But I guess from what I can best surmise, I think that the tips for success for people who would want to stay here really are about keeping an open mind and being flexible. It's always nice. So no matter what your technical skills are and the talents that you might bring to a company, they may one day not be needed or not be appreciated. But if you tend to be what I would call a good corporate citizen, someone who is always willing and able to volunteer and cooperate and work hard with others and help them out when they need it instead of focusing only on their own work, those are the kind of people that are going to be well regarded when it comes time to let someone go, because they're going to want to keep the people who have shown the ability to work across skill areas and units and different kind of people. And I know that's the person I would keep rather than the person who's the strongest necessarily in coding or accounting practice, believe it or not, because anybody can develop skills. Not everybody can develop as quickly and ably the ability to get along with others. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's really important.
So, any message for the current students and the prospective students?
Yeah, and I don't know if it's just what I've learned here and for students at IMT Dubai or what I would say to anyone. It's kind of hard to tell, but what I admire most and see not enough of is initiative. And that will impress me most, and I suspect it impresses any business person who wants to grow their business and maybe expand into new areas. Anyone who's involved in changing their organization, whether it's internally driven or somehow required by the environment, if people can't show their own commitment and initiative to take on new and challenging tasks, there's no real place for them. And so a lot of our students tend to be timid. They sit back and wait to be told. Maybe they don't have that courage or that confidence or that experience taking charge. But that's actually what's needed. And if I were going to hire anybody for a business that I was running, the first thing I would ensure is they could demonstrate to me that they don't need me to boss them around. Now, I can't speak for other managers in the world, but I think the way the world is going, there's not much space left for people who sit back and want to take a ride. The world is all about, the world requires people who are kind of behind the wheel and ready to drive, you know what I mean? And that's what I would wish for all my students, is that they can take charge.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate. Thank you for taking out some time. I believe this will help the students, from both current and the prospective students. So with this, we end the interview. Thank you so much, sir, for giving time. Thank you so much.